Before we talk about the Mafia, let me ask you something uncomfortable. When you hear the word organized crime, why do you imagine shadows? Why do you picture alleyways, gangs, and fugitives? Because history trained you to look down instead of up. The truth is brutal. The most successful crime syndicates never hid from the law. They wrote it, and they didn't start in the 20th century. They started with crowns. Long before modern mafias, ancient kings perfected organized crime, not with guns, with systems, because power doesn't need violence once it controls survival. Let's go back to the first civilizations: Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and China. These weren't just cultures, they were economic machines. And at the center of every machine was one institution that controlled everything. That is temple. Temples were not places of prayer. They were the first banks. They stored grain during harvest, issued loans during famine, recorded debts on clay tablets. Miss your repayment, and you didn't lose money. You lost land, freedom, sometimes your children, all justified in the name of the gods. This wasn't charity. This was divine extortion. Now pause. Replace the temple with a financial institution. Replace priests with risk managers. Replace divine punishment with default notices. Same pressure, different vocabulary. Ancient rulers understood a dangerous truth. If you control resources, you control people. So they created monopolies. Salt in Rome, iron in China, spices in India, gold routes across Africa. Trade without royal permission wasn't illegal. It was treason. You didn't compete with the king. You paid him. That wasn't taxation. That was protection money, backed by swords. Fast forward to today: oil licenses, mining rights, telecom spectrum, pharmaceutical patents. Still monopolies, still protected, still enforced. Only now, refusal doesn't bring soldiers. It brings lawsuits. Ancient armies weren't built for defense. They were built for economic dominance. Wars weren't random. They were planned acquisitions. New land meant new taxes. New slaves meant cheap labor. New trade routes meant permanent revenue. Blood was just the transaction cost. Now look at modern wars. Defense stocks rise. Reconstruction contracts appear. Currencies collapse, then get bought cheap. War didn't disappear. It just learned how to file reports. Even ancient crime syndicates took notes, because kings proved one lesson perfectly. The safest crime is the one legalized. That's why modern mafia doesn't shake you down on the street. It sits on boards, writes regulations, funds campaigns. No threats, just policy. Think carefully. If a gang forces you to pay monthly money, it's extortion. If a system deducts it automatically from your income, it's called compliance. If you question it, you're told it's for stability. Ancient emperors said the same thing. Debt itself is ancient mafia logic. Once you owe, you obey. In ancient times, debt turned farmers into slaves. Today, it turns workers into lifetimes of payments. Different chains, same weight. And here's the most dangerous realization. Ancient societies didn't collapse because they were corrupt. They collapsed because the system became too efficient at extraction. When people exist only to feed the machine eventually eats itself. Rome learned that. Empires learned that. We're pretending we didn't. So when people say, crime is a failure of society, they're wrong. Crime built society. It just evolved into institutions that look respectable. The ancient mafia wore crowns and robes. The modern mafia wears suits and spreadsheets. One ruled through fear of gods. The other rules through fear of collapse. But both run on the same engine. Control access. Control rules. Control consequences. This is ancient finance, where history doesn't repeat. It refines. If this made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is awareness. Because once you see how the first economies were really built, you stop asking, who runs the world? And start asking, why did they design it this way? Subscribe. Because understanding money isn't about getting rich. It's about not being quietly owned.